Of course I know most of the big things, and have examined them more or less, but really, in a sort of way I have always taken them for granted, as though they had always been there. I have noticed the same thing now and again with family pictures, and the way they are taken for granted by the family. If you will let me examine them with you, it would be delightful." It was a joy to me to hear her talk in such a way, and her last suggestion quite thrilled me. Together we went round the various rooms and passages, examining and admiring the magnificent curios. There was such a bewildering amount and variety of objects that we could only glance at most of them, but as we went along we arranged that we should take them seriatim, day by day, and examine them more closely. In the hall was a sort of big frame of floriated steelwork which Margaret said her father used for lifting the heavy stone lids of the sarcophagi. It was not heavy, and could be moved about easily enough. By aid of this we raised the covers in turn, and looked at the endless series of hieroglyphic pictures cut in most of them. In spite of her profession of ignorance, Margaret knew a good deal about them. Her year of life with her father had had unconsciously its daily and hourly lesson. She was a remarkably clever and acute-minded girl, and with a prodigious memory, so that her store of knowledge, gathered unthinkingly bit by bit, had grown to proportions that many a scholar might have envied. And yet it was all so naive and unconscious, so girlish and simple. She was so fresh in her views and ideas, and had so little thought of self, that in her companionship I forgot for the time all the troubles and mysteries which enmeshed the house, and I felt like a boy again. The most interesting of the sarcophagi were undoubtedly the three in Mr. Trelawny's room. Of these, two were of dark stone, one of porphyry, and the other of a sort of ironstone. These were wrought with some hieroglyphs. But the third was strikingly different. It was of some yellow-brown substance of the dominating color effect of Mexican onyx, which it resembled in many ways, excepting that the natural pattern of its convolutions was less marked. Here and there were patches almost transparent, certainly translucent. The whole chest, cover and all, was wrought with hundreds, perhaps thousands, of minute hieroglyphics, seemingly in an endless series. Back, front, sides, edges, bottom, all had their quota of the dainty pictures, the deep blue of their coloring showing up fresh and sharply edged in the yellow stone. It was very long, nearly 9 feet, and perhaps a yard wide. The sides undulated, so that there was no hard line. Even the corners took such excellent curves that they pleased the eye. "Truly," I said, "this must have been made for a giant." "Or for a giantess," said Margaret. This sarcophagus stood near to one of the windows. It was in one respect different from all the other sarcophagi in the place. All the others in the house, of whatever material, granite, porphyry, ironstone, basalt, slate, or wood, were quite simple in form within. Some of them were plain of interior surface, others were engraved, in whole or part, with hieroglyphics. But each and all of them had no protuberances or uneven surface anywhere. They might have been used for baths. Indeed, they resembled in many ways Roman baths of stone or marble which I had seen. Inside this, however, was a raised space, outlined like a human figure. I asked Margaret if she could explain it in any way. For answer she said: "Father never wished to speak about this. It attracted my attention from the first, but when I asked him about it, he said, 'I shall tell you all about it some day, little girl, if I live. But not yet. The story is not yet told, as I hope to tell it to you. Some day, perhaps soon, I shall know all, and then we shall go over it together. And a mighty interesting story you will find it, from first to last." Once afterward I said, rather lightly I am afraid, "Is that story of the sarcophagus told yet, Father?" He shook his head, and looked at me gravely as he said, "Not yet, little girl, but it will be, if I live. If I live." His repeating that phrase about his living rather frightened me. I never ventured to ask him again. Somehow this thrilled me. I could not exactly say how or why, but it seemed like a gleam of light, at least. There are, I think, moments when the mind accepts something as true, though it can account for neither the course of the thought, nor, if there be more than one thought, the connection between them. Hitherto we had been in such outer darkness regarding Mr. Trelawny, and the strange visitation which had fallen on him, that anything which afforded a clue, even of the faintest and most shadowy kind, had at the outset the enlightening satisfaction of a certainty. Here were two lights of our puzzle. The first, that Mr. Trelawny associated with this particular curio a doubt of his own living. The second, that he had some purpose or expectation with regard to it, which he would not disclose, even to his daughter, till complete. Again it was to be borne in mind that this sarcophagus differed internally from all the others. What meant that odd raised place? I said nothing to Miss Trelawny, for I feared lest I should either frighten her or buoy her up with future hopes; but I made up my mind that I would take an early opportunity for further investigation. Close beside the sarcophagus was a low table of green stone with red veins in it, like bloodstone. The feet were fashioned like the paws of a jackal, and round each leg was twined a full-throated snake wrought exquisitely in pure gold. On it rested a strange and very beautiful coffer or casket of stone of a peculiar shape. It was something like a small coffin, except that the longer sides, instead of being cut off square like the upper or level part, were continued to a point. Thus it was an irregular septahedron, there being two planes on each of the two sides, one end and a top and bottom. The stone, of one piece of which it was wrought, was such as I had never seen before. At the base it was of a full green, the colour of emerald without, of course, its gleam. It was not by any means dull, however, either in colour or substance, and was of infinite hardness and fineness of texture. The surface was almost that of a jewel. The colour grew lighter as it rose, with gradation so fine as to be imperceptible, changing to a fine yellow almost of the colour of mandarin china. It was quite unlike anything I had ever seen, and did not resemble any stone or gem that I knew. I took it to be some unique mother stone, or matrix of some gem. It was wrought all over, except in a few spots, with fine hieroglyphics, exquisitely done and coloured with the same blue-green cement or pigment that appeared on the sarcophagus. In length it was about 2 feet and a half, in breadth about half this, and was nearly a foot high. The vacant spaces were irregularly distributed about the top running to the pointed end. These places seemed less opaque than the rest of the stone. I tried to lift up the lid so that I might see if they were translucent, but it was securely fixed. It fitted so exactly that the whole coffer seemed like a single piece of stone mysteriously hollowed from within. On the sides and edges were some odd-looking protuberances, wrought just as finely as any other portion of the coffer, which had been sculptured by manifest design in the cutting of the stone. They had queer-shaped holes or hollows, different in each, and like the rest were covered with the hieroglyphic figures, cut finely and filled in with the same blue green.